Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Victoria Newman had thought she had seen it all in her lifetime, having grown up as the daughter of the ruthless Victor Newman, endured cutthroat battles in the boardroom, survived love affairs that ended in betrayal, and fought to protect her children from danger time and time again. But nothing could have prepared her for the bone-chilling revelation that unfolded the night she stumbled upon the truth about Claire Grace and Holden Novak's mysterious basement, a discovery that left her horrified and questioning everything she thought she knew about the people who had recently become entwined with her family's lives, and the ominous secrets that lurked beneath the surface of Genoa City. It all began innocently enough, with Victoria deciding to stop by Holden's property on the outskirts of town after Claire had been acting strangely distant in recent days, her once soft-spoken niece growing evasive and avoiding eye contact whenever Victoria pressed her about her relationship with Holden, and Victoria's maternal instincts had always been sharpened further by years of watching her father manipulate, deceive, and investigate everyone who entered the Newman orbit. So when she pulled up to Holden's imposing house that evening, she wasn't simply making a social call, she was following her gut, that ever-present warning bell that told her something wasn't right. The air was thick with unease the moment she stepped out of her car, the grand estate-looking picture perfect from the outside but cloaked in an unsettling stillness that made her shiver, as though the walls themselves were guarding unspeakable secrets, and Victoria, determined not to back down, made her way to the door, surprised to find it slightly ajar as if someone had left in a hurry or perhaps wanted her to enter, an invitation that felt more like a trap. Inside, the house was immaculate, every surface polished, every piece of furniture precisely in place, yet the silence was deafening. Not even the ticking of a clock to break the tension, and as she moved deeper into the home, her heels clicking against the marble floor, Victoria felt the weight of eyes on her, though when she turned, there was no one, only the shadows stretching long in the dim light, and it was then she noticed a faint draft near the back hallway, a whisper of air that seemed to come from nowhere, drawing her toward a door she had not seen before, a door that appeared ordinary yet out of place in such a carefully curated home, its paint just slightly different in hue, its knob worn as though handled more frequently than any other. Her pulse quickened as she reached out, half expecting it to be locked, but to her surprise, the door creaked open with little resistance, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness, and though every instinct screamed at her to turn back, Victoria's curiosity and fear for Claire pushed her forward, each step echoing in the hollow space, the smell of damp concrete and something metallic, something like blood, growing stronger the deeper she went, until she reached the basement, and what she saw made her heart slam against her ribs, her breath catching in her throat, because the space before her was nothing like a normal storage basement. It was a labyrinth of secrets, meticulously arranged and disturbingly intentional, with one side lined with photographs pinned to corkboards, hundreds of images spanning years, some of strangers, some of Genoa City residents, and chillingly, several of the Newman family themselves, including her, Nikki, and even her children, each marked with handwritten notes and dates that suggested careful surveillance, an obsession so methodical it made her skin crawl, while another section of the room was filled with odd artifacts, trinkets that looked like keepsakes stolen from their owners, lockets, watches, even children's toys, each placed in glass cases as though part of some twisted collection, and in the corner, a heavy steel door with reinforced locks suggested there was another level of horror hidden just out of sight. Victoria's voice shook as she whispered Claire's name, hoping desperately that her niece wasn't responsible for what she was seeing, hoping there was some explanation, but the sound that answered her wasn't Claire's, it was the creak of footsteps behind her, and when she spun around, there stood Claire and Holden, side by side, their expressions unreadable, and the silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria searching her niece's face for a hint of remorse or fear, but instead seeing a calm resolve that chilled her to the bone, while Holden's eyes gleamed with a mix of pride and menace, as though he had been waiting for this very moment, the unveiling of his carefully guarded secrets. Holden spoke first, his tone smooth yet laced with warning, telling Victoria that curiosity could be dangerous, that sometimes family should leave well enough alone, and Claire, though softer in delivery, echoed him, insisting that what Victoria had found was not what it seemed, though she offered no real explanation. only vague assurances that she and Holden were protecting themselves, that everything in the basement had a purpose she couldn't yet understand. But to Victoria, the words rang hollow, and the sight of her niece standing so comfortably in such a twisted chamber of secrets broke her heart, because Claire had worked so hard to rebuild trust after the trauma Jordan had inflicted on her, and now it seemed as though she was once again entangled in darkness, only this time, it was by her own choice. Victoria, horrified and furious, demanded answers, her voice trembling with both rage and fear, asking why her family was being watched, why there were so many stolen relics, why a steel-locked room existed in the basement of a man she barely knew. But neither Claire nor Holden gave her clarity, only cryptic remarks about legacies, protection, and a reckoning that was coming to Genoa City. And the way Holden spoke of it sent a shiver down Victoria's spine, because it was not the language of innocence, it was the language of a man who saw himself as orchestrating some grand plan, one that involved her family whether they consented or not. She felt trapped, knowing she couldn't simply storm out without consequence, yet unwilling to stay another moment in the nightmare room, and as she weighed her options, she realized Holden had subtly positioned himself between her and the staircase, his presence both intimidating and deliberate, while Claire's conflicted gaze flickered as though silently begging Victoria to trust her, though her refusal to break away from Holden's side spoke volumes. The moment stretched endlessly, Victoria's mind racing, her heart pounding, as she understood that whatever secrets were buried in that basement were far darker than she had imagined, and escaping with her sanity, and perhaps her life, would be no easy task. But one thing was certain. The Newman family had been targeted, and Victoria's discovery of Claire and Holden's basement was only the beginning of a dangerous new chapter that would test loyalties, unravel identities, and force her to confront the possibility that the people she loved most were not only in danger but perhaps complicit in a conspiracy she could barely comprehend, leaving her horrified, shaken, and more determined than ever to expose the truth before it was too late. Victoria's horror only deepened as the weight of the silence between her, Claire, and Holden stretched unbearably, the oppressive air of the basement pressing down on her like a physical force, each second making her feel more trapped, more suffocated by the web of secrets swirling around her. And though her first instinct was to lash out, demand answers, demand to know what Holden's true intentions were and why Claire was standing by his side as though they were allies in some grand scheme, something inside her warned that she needed to tread carefully, for the look in Holden's eyes wasn't just unsettling, it was calculating, the gaze of a man who had anticipated this very confrontation, and Victoria knew all too well from her own father's playbook that men like Holden never left anything to chance. So if she had discovered the basement, then Holden had likely orchestrated it, or at least prepared for the fallout. Her mind raced with memories of Jordan's manipulations, the way Claire had once been weaponized against the Newmans, and though Claire had seemed to heal and rebuild a life with the family that had finally welcomed her, this chilling alliance with Holden made Victoria question whether her niece had ever truly broken free from the shadows of her past, or if she had simply traded one manipulative figure for another, someone who knew how to exploit her vulnerabilities and sense of belonging. And as Victoria's gaze darted around the room again, the photos, the artifacts, the locked steel door, she realized that this wasn't some random collection of oddities. It was a narrative, a carefully constructed story in which the Newmans were central characters, as though Holden and Claire were studying them, preparing for something monumental, something that would shake their empire to its core. Her hands trembled slightly as she demanded to know what the steel door concealed, her voice sharper now, edged with the authority she had inherited from Victor, and for a moment, Claire's expression cracked, a flicker of unease darting across her face. But Holden's steady hand on her shoulder seemed to anchor her back into complicity, his smooth baritone dismissing Victoria's demand as premature, saying cryptically that some truths reveal themselves in time and that she wasn't ready to see what lay beyond that door, which only fueled her terror because she had lived long enough to know that any truth a man like Holden guarded so fiercely was bound to be devastating, perhaps even deadly. Victoria's mind spun with possibilities. Was it evidence of crimes, proof of a vendetta against her family, or something more sinister like a captive, someone hidden away in the darkness? And her gut twisted at the thought that Holden might be holding leverage over them in the most literal sense, yet the calm, almost reverent way he spoke about legacy and destiny unnerved her even more, for it wasn't just about power or revenge, it was about ideology, and the way he included Claire in his rhetoric suggested he saw her not as an accomplice but as an heir, a protégé, someone he was grooming for a future role in his twisted vision, which made Victoria's stomach churn because she had spent so long trying to rebuild her bond with Claire, to nurture her as family, and now it seemed as though she was losing her all over again to a force that was darker and more insidious than she could have ever imagined. Trying to steady her breathing, Victoria attempted to appeal to Claire directly, softening her voice, reminding her of the nights they had stayed up late talking about family, about healing, about the future, and how she had promised never to let anyone manipulate her again. But though Claire's eyes glistened as if those memories still meant something, her refusal to step away from Holden's side spoke volumes, a silent testament to the hold he had on her. And Victoria's heart broke in real time as she realized she might not be able to save her niece from herself, not without first dismantling Holden's grip. The standoff intensified, Victoria's fight-or-flight instincts roaring as Holden subtly shifted closer, not overtly threatening but undeniably blocking her path to the stairs, his towering frame a reminder that she was trapped in his domain, on his terms, and though she longed to storm past him, to call Victor or Nick and expose everything she had seen, she knew instinctively that revealing her hand too soon could put her entire family at greater risk, for Holden was clearly a man who thrived on control, and if he suspected she might betray his confidence, he would act swiftly and ruthlessly, perhaps even using Claire as both shield and weapon. So Victoria, summoning every ounce of poise she had learned from years of navigating Victor's world, forced her expression into one of cool detachment, masking the fear coursing through her veins, and told Holden she understood his message, that she would keep what she had seen to herself until she had time to process it, a calculated gamble that she hoped would buy her enough time to escape and gather her thoughts. And though Holden studied her carefully, as though trying to decipher her sincerity, he finally gave a slow, chilling smile, one that made her skin crawl, and allowed her to retreat toward the stairs, his hand never straying far from Claire's shoulder, a silent reminder of the control he wielded. Every step up those creaking stairs felt like climbing out of a nightmare, Victoria's lungs expanding with relief as she finally reached the main floor, but the oppressive dread followed her, the basement's secrets clinging to her like a shadow, and as she stepped back into the night air, she vowed silently that she would not let this go, that she would find out exactly what Holden was hiding, what he had drawn Claire into, and how her family had become central to whatever twisted plan he was orchestrating. For the Newmans had faced enemies before, power-hungry rivals, vengeful lovers, manipulative interlopers, but this was different. This was a war being waged not just in the boardroom or the bedroom, but in the dark underbelly of Genoa City, and if she didn't act quickly, the entire Newman dynasty could crumble under the weight of secrets buried in Holden's basement. Back at home that night, Victoria's mind was restless, her body exhausted but her thoughts relentless, images of the photographs and artifacts flashing before her eyes, and though she wanted desperately to confide in her father, to let Victor unleash his formidable wrath on Holden Novak, something held her back, a gnawing instinct that Holden might be anticipating such a move, that he might even want Victor to storm in guns blazing so he could twist the narrative to his advantage, and so she chose silence for now, keeping the discovery locked inside, though the burden was suffocating, because she knew every moment she delayed was another moment Holden could solidify his grip on Claire and whatever plan he was building. Yet Victoria also knew she needed proof, undeniable evidence of his schemes, something that even Victor couldn't dismiss as paranoia, and the steel door in that basement haunted her as the answer, the one thing that could unlock the truth, though the risk of returning terrified her. In the days that followed, Claire acted almost normally, visiting the Newman office, engaging in casual conversation, but Victoria's eyes caught the subtle shifts, the way she avoided certain topics, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, the way she flinched when asked about Holden, as though she were constantly carrying the weight of secrets, and it broke Victoria's heart anew to watch her niece perform normalcy while tethered to darkness, reminding her of her own years spent hiding pain behind polished facades, and she vowed that this cycle would not claim Claire again, no matter what it took. But what Victoria didn't yet realize was that her discovery had already set into motion a chain of events she couldn't stop. Because Holden had anticipated her reaction, had studied her family long enough to predict how she would respond, and in his eyes, the moment she stepped into that basement, she ceased to be merely an observer and became a player in his grand design, a pawn he fully intended to maneuver against Victor Newman himself, and as Victoria sat in her office late one night, staring at the family portrait on her desk, she knew deep down that what she had seen wasn't just a basement full of secrets, it was a declaration of war. And the terrifying truth was that the war had already begun. Victoria could hardly sleep in the days following her horrific discovery of Holden's basement, her mind haunted not only by the images plastered on the walls but by the heavy steel door that had loomed like a silent monster in the shadows, a door Holden had denied her access to, a door that seemed to mock her with the weight of secrets too devastating to be spoken aloud, and though she had promised herself she would bide her time, gathering strength and strategy before confronting him again. The truth was eating her alive, each night a restless blur of half-dreams in which she imagined the worst, bodies hidden in the darkness, recordings of the Newman family's most vulnerable moments, or even some kind of shrine tying Holden's obsession back to Jordan, the woman who had nearly destroyed them all. Victoria's paranoia grew with every passing hour, her instinct to protect her family clashing with her fear that one wrong move could endanger them all, and though she resisted the urge to confide in Victor at first, knowing her father's explosive nature could escalate things too quickly, she eventually sat alone in her office one night and whispered her fears into the void, rehearsing what she might say if she did tell him, how she could convince him that Claire was once again entangled in something sinister. But every scenario ended the same, with Victor unleashing his wrath and Holden retaliating in ways they couldn't anticipate, and so she chose silence once again, though the weight of it threatened to crush her. At the same time, she began to notice strange patterns around her, subtle hints that Holden might be watching her as closely as she was watching him, a black car parked outside Newman Enterprises longer than it should have been, a series of phone calls that went dead the moment she answered, even the unnerving sense that someone had entered her home and left everything exactly as it was, save for a faint scent of cologne she didn't recognize lingering in the air, and with each occurrence, her unease grew, until she realized Holden was not just daring her to react, he was controlling the pace of their battle, letting her know that every move she made was under his surveillance. And then there was Claire, who only deepened the mystery with her increasingly conflicted behavior, at times looking every bit the devoted niece, laughing softly with Johnny and Katie during family gatherings, reassuring Victoria with gentle words, but other times showing up late to meetings with her eyes darting nervously as if she'd been somewhere she shouldn't, her phone always glued to her side, her allegiance to Holden an invisible tether that pulled her away whenever Victoria tried to pull her closer, and Victoria, though furious at Holden's manipulation, couldn't shake the gnawing fear that Claire was slipping beyond her reach, the girl she had tried so hard to save once again teetering on the edge of darkness. Determined to uncover the truth, Victoria began her own secret investigation, leveraging her Newman resources discreetly, careful not to alert Victor, Nick, or even Nate, knowing too many questions would tip her hand, and instead she hired a private security team under the guise of protecting a corporate interest, tasking them with tailing Holden, mapping his routines, and attempting to dig into his past, but the results were chillingly thin. Holden Novak, for all his wealth and presence, seemed to have very little verifiable history, as though he had appeared out of nowhere, his background scrubbed clean, his connections vague and unreliable. And when one of the security men reported back that Holden had made several late-night visits to properties on the outskirts of town, including one abandoned warehouse, Victoria's skin prickled with dread, for she knew all too well that men like Holden did not conduct their business in the light of day. One evening, driven by desperation, Victoria made the reckless decision to return to Holden's estate alone, convincing herself that he and Claire would be otherwise occupied at a Newman Media event, and she parked far enough away to avoid suspicion before slipping quietly into the house, the memory of her last visit flooding her senses as she retraced her steps to the hidden door, her heart hammering in her chest as she descended into the basement once more, the damp chill wrapping around her. Like a shroud, the photographs and artifacts remained as they had before, though she noticed some were missing, newspapers and trinkets she had clearly seen days earlier, now gone as though Holden was actively curating or removing pieces of evidence, and her gaze fell again on the steel door, its locks gleaming coldly in the dim light, taunting her, and she moved closer, pulling a small lock-picking tool from her purse, a skill she had acquired during her rebellious younger years when she had learned how to bypass the occasional lock for thrill or necessity, though never for something as dangerous as this. Her hands trembled as she worked, the clicking of metal against metal echoing in the silence, until finally, with a satisfying snap, one of the locks gave way, then another, until the heavy door groaned open, revealing a sight that made her blood run cold. The room beyond was stark and windowless, with walls covered not in photographs but in maps and diagrams, blueprints of Newman Enterprises properties, Newman Media headquarters, and even the Newman Ranch, each marked with notes and red strings connecting them like some massive conspiracy board. And in the center of the room sat a single desk with a laptop and neatly stacked files, each bearing the names of Newman family members, including her children, Johnny and Katie, their school schedules meticulously documented, their routines mapped out with chilling precision, and Victoria's knees nearly buckled as the realization struck her. This wasn't just an obsession.